I've spent most of my life being the good daughter no one noticed. I don't mean that in a bitter, flippant way. I mean it in the literal sense. I was the one who never raised my voice, who got B's and quietly made them into A's. I didn't sneak out, didn't break curfew, didn't crash the car. I smiled through every family gathering, washed dishes without being asked, remembered birthdays, and let my older sister Vivian soak up the spotlight like she was born to be seen. Because she was. She's a doctor now. Everyone calls her Doctor. Vivian like it's a title of royalty. She earned it, sure. But somewhere along the way, that crown came at a cost. And I guess that cost was me. I'm Clara. I'm 23, and I've spent the last 10 years learning how to disappear in a house full of expectations. My family is first-generation Vietnamese American, and if you know anything about that dynamic, you know it comes with a very specific definition of success. Be obedient, be brilliant, be useful. Vivian fit that mold so perfectly it was like she was made in a lab. Straight A's, piano competitions, med school on the first try. Every time she walked into a room, my mom's voice got louder, my dad's smile got wider. And me? I loved to draw. I was the kid doodling on math homework, designing fake logos for fake companies in my sketchbook, coloring on the walls when I was 5. But in my house, that wasn't talent. That was distraction. Wasteful. Cute, at best. Once, in 9th grade, I won first place in a statewide design contest for a poster about fire safety. They published it in a local newspaper. When I showed it to my parents, my mom squinted at the clipping and said, "Why didn't you win something for science?" That was the first time I quietly folded away something I was proud of and told myself not to bother next time. Fast forward to last year, during our family's Lunar New Year gathering. Vivian had flown in from Boston with her boyfriend, the surgeon with perfect hair, of course, and our entire extended family crowded into my uncle's house. The usual: roasted pork, red envelopes, distant relatives asking invasive questions. But that year, Vivian had prepared a slideshow of her recent medical missions. Pictures of her posing with patients, scrubs, and stethoscope. Her and the surgeon boyfriend smiling under mosquito nets. My dad set up the projector himself. Everyone applauded. Here's the kicker. I helped her make that slideshow. I formatted the whole thing, added the transitions, adjusted the audio levels, even fixed the color correction on the grainy photos. And not once did anyone say, "Clara helped." My name wasn't mentioned. My face wasn't even in the family group photo later. I took the photo. When I told my mom I was feeling kind of invisible, she laughed and said, "Don't be dramatic. Vivian's doing real work." Then she handed me a tray of banh chung to reheat. That night, I stood outside on the porch in the cold, watching fireworks explode over the neighborhood. My aunt from San Jose came out to smoke, saw me tearing up, and asked what was wrong. I just shook my head. What was I supposed to say? That my family sees me as a kitchen ghost? I applied for a study abroad program in London a week later. Didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend. I wasn't trying to run away. I was trying to figure out if there was any version of me that could exist outside of Vivian's shadow. I got in. Full ride. The catch? It starts in 6 months. I haven't told my parents yet. I know what they'll say. I already hear it in my head. Why waste time overseas when you could go to grad school here? Design? How is that a real job? Vivian never ran off like that. But I need this. Because lately I've been having this dream, more like a memory of when I was 8. My art teacher pulled me aside after class and whispered, "You see the world differently, Clara. Don't let anyone tell you that's a bad thing." I didn't understand it then, but I think I do now. They've never seen me. But I'm done waiting to be seen. The only question left is, when I finally tell them, what's going to break? I moved to New York 3 months later. It wasn't easy. I had to come up with an excuse so my parents wouldn't question the sudden relocation. I told them I'd found a remote design internship that required me to be closer to industry hubs. They barely looked up from their phones. My dad said, "Just don't forget to call your grandma once in a while." That was the extent of their concern. I wish I could say it hurt, but it was actually a relief. No drama, no guilt trip. Just a quiet, clean break. Or so I thought. The truth is, I didn't go to New York for a job. I was accepted into the graduate design program at Covington Institute, one of the most selective visual arts schools in the country. They only take 12 students per year. I had submitted my portfolio on a whim, late at night after that New Year's disaster, not expecting anything to come of it. But I got in. Full scholarship. I remember reading the acceptance email at 2:17 a.m. in the kitchen, barefoot, spoon halfway to my mouth. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the glow of the fridge light, staring at the screen like it had been sent to the wrong Claronian. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need my parents to clap. I didn't even need them to know. So I packed 2 suitcases, told them I'd be staying with a friend from college, and left. At first, I felt free. My days were filled with lectures on typography theory, collaborative studio critiques, field trips to design firms in Soho. I was surrounded by weird, brilliant people who talked with their hands and saw the world in layers of texture and negative space. I was finally speaking a language I didn't have to translate. But the freedom came with a price. I couldn't post anything publicly. Not my projects, not my wins, not even photos of my studio desk. I lived in 2 realities. The one where I was thriving in the most intense creative program I'd ever known, and the one where I was still figuring things out back home. Every phone call with my mom was an exhausting improv act. Are you eating well? Yeah, lots of soup and eggs. Still doing that little freelance thing? Yup, got a few small clients. Meanwhile, I was designing motion graphics for a Nike pitch, and my professors were pushing me toward an elite design fellowship in Amsterdam. Sometimes I'd stare at the phone screen after a call, wondering what it would take for me to just tell her. But then I'd remember her voice at that New Year's party, praising Vivian's mission work like she had walked on water, while I carried the damn food trays. The only time my name came up was when someone asked if I could fix their computer. So I stayed quiet. I became fluent in invisibility. Then came the conflict. My program announced that I had been selected as a keynote speaker for the Covington Design Futures Summit. It's a massive deal. Streamed online, industry leaders attending, press coverage, everything. I was speechless when the department head told me, "Your capstone project on cultural distortion in branding is unlike anything we've seen," she said. "This is your moment." Only one problem. The summit date fell on the exact weekend of my grandmother's 80th birthday. The one I was expected to fly home for. No ifs, no buts, just assumed. My mom texted me, "Don't forget your Audai. You're sitting next to the altar for the ceremony. Grandma wants to see both her granddaughters together. Make time." I stared at those messages for a long time. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to comply. After all, it's just one weekend, right? I could fly back, smile politely, pretend for 48 hours, then fly home and do my speech next year, or never. But then I remembered the slideshow. The photo my dad took with just Vivian, posted online with the caption, "So proud of my daughter and her heart for the world." No mention of me. Not even a "Clara's here too." So I made a decision. Quietly, firmly. I texted my mom, "I have a commitment I can't miss. Please give Grandma my love." No explanation, no apology. Her reply came hours later. Disappointed, as usual. And that cut deeper than I expected. The night before the summit, I stood in front of my apartment mirror in a blazer I had thrifted and altered by hand. My hands were shaking. Not because I was scared of the speech, but because part of me still wanted her to be proud. Still wanted to forward her the live stream link. Still hoped she might surprise me with a call. But the silence stayed. So I stood on that stage the next morning, took a breath, and told the story I needed to tell. Not about family, not directly, but about the invisibility of voices that don't fit expectations. About design as a way of reclaiming space. about daughters who speak in shapes and colors because words never got them anywhere. I didn't just survive that moment. I filled it. I owned it. And for the first time, I wasn't hiding anymore. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was running late to class. I had a half-finished coffee in one hand, my sketch pad tucked under my arm, and my brain still foggy from a sleepless night working on portfolio edits. I was halfway across campus when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. I was already 5 minutes late, and Professor Dorsey was not the forgiving type. But something about the caller ID made me stop cold. Mom. She never called during the day. Texts, sure. Guilt-loaded one-liners like, "Don't forget Grandma's blood pressure pills," or "Vivian says hi." But phone calls? Rare. Unsettling. I picked up. Her voice was quiet, like she was underwater. "Clara, your dad had a stroke this morning. It's strange, the way bad news lands." I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just stood there in the middle of the sidewalk, people brushing past me like I wasn't real. She kept talking. About ambulances, about the hospital, about Vivian flying in that evening, but it all blurred into static. And then came the part that really landed. "We didn't tell you sooner because, well, we figured you were too busy with your art things." My art things. Like I was painting tulips and blowing glitter onto canvas. Like my entire world hadn't shifted months ago. Like I hadn't just delivered a speech that got written up in DesignWire. Like I wasn't building something real. Something worthy, out of the ashes of the daughter they never cared to know. I sat down on the curb and stared at the asphalt. I knew I had to go. Not because I felt like it was my place, but because the alternative, staying away, would haunt me. So I booked the first flight I could afford, packed in 15 minutes, and flew back to Denver in silence. When I walked into the ICU room the next day, my mother barely looked at me. Vivian was already there, perfectly composed, holding Dad's hand like a scene from a medical drama. She stood up when she saw me. "Clara," she said, flat. "Did you just land?" "Last night." She nodded. No hug. My dad looked smaller, not just physically, but somehow reduced. The man who used to stomp through the house like he owned every square inch of it now lay tangled in tubes, speechless, eyes darting, as if trapped inside himself. I stood by the bed and tried to feel something. Guilt, anger, sadness, something. But all I felt was a hollow pressure in my chest, like an overdue breath I couldn't quite release. Later that night, I overheard them talking in the hallway. "I'm glad you came," Vivian said to my mom. "I didn't think Clara would show up." "She almost didn't," Mom replied. "Can't blame her, though. She's been distant, secretive." "Well," Vivian added with a shrug, "not everyone's cut out to deal with reality." That was it. Not anger, not shock, just numb. Because that was how they had rewritten me. In the weeks since I said no to coming home, no to sacrificing myself again, they had turned me into the selfish one, the unreliable daughter, the one who chose art things over family. They never once asked what I'd been doing. So I stayed for the week, sat in the background of every conversation, got coffee when told, nodded when expected, invisible again. Then came the funeral plans. My mom told me flat out that Vivian would be speaking at the service. Naturally, Dad's pride and joy. I wasn't offered a role, not even a reading. Just the assumption that I'd sit in row 3 with the extended cousins and try not to make a scene. What they didn't know is that I had already written something. Not for them. For me. A eulogy, yes. But more than that. An honest goodbye. Not just to my dad, but to the version of myself I had spent my whole life trying to be for them. The obedient one. The lesser one. The easy-to-ignore one. The night before the funeral, I sat on the floor of my childhood bedroom, now half storage unit, half shrine to Vivian's old trophies, and read it out loud. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling. No bitterness. Just truth. Quiet. Brutal. Clear. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, the church was full. White lilies, soft piano music, faces I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Vivian stood at the pulpit, polished and poised, reading from a piece of linen cardstock. She spoke of Dad's dedication, his work ethic, his sacrifice. She didn't mention me. After she finished, the pastor closed his binder and gestured for the next portion of the service to begin, the final hymn. And that's when I stood up. I didn't plan to speak at the funeral. Not really. I had written something, sure. But the idea of actually standing up in front of that entire church, our family, Dad's coworkers, old neighbors, church aunties with too much perfume and even more opinions, terrified me. Still, there I was, on my feet, my legs moving before my brain fully caught up. The room went still. Vivian, who had just returned to her seat, looked at me with narrowed eyes. My mother's jaw tightened. She mouthed something. I think it was Clara, sit down. But I didn't. I walked to the front, past the rows of bowed heads and half-curious, half-disapproving glances. I didn't look at anyone. Just the pastor, who hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. He didn't stop me. That was all the permission I needed. I unfolded the piece of paper I'd kept tucked in my coat pocket. It was a little wrinkled. My hands were shaking. I took a breath. I wasn't supposed to speak today. I began, voice quiet but steady. And honestly, I debated whether I should. For a long time, I thought silence was the best way to keep peace in this family. I paused, let it land. But the truth is, I've been silent for most of my life. And it didn't keep the peace. It just kept me invisible. You could have heard a pin drop. My father was a complex man. He was disciplined, proud, unyielding, sometimes to a fault. And for those he believed in, he would move mountains. I didn't look at Vivian, but I felt her flinch. Growing up, I wasn't the one he believed in. I wasn't on track for med school, didn't bring home trophies, didn't fit into the mold of what a good daughter was supposed to be. I loved design. I saw the world in color and pattern and shape. But in our house, that didn't count. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I kept going. I spent years trying to prove myself. Quietly. Because saying it out loud didn't work. I once helped design a national campaign for mental health awareness and got it featured in 3 cities. My dad never saw it, because I didn't tell him. Because the last time I tried to share a small win, he asked if I'd considered getting a real job. I let that sit. I know some of you probably think this is the wrong time. Maybe it is. But I'm not saying any of this out of anger. I loved my father, in ways I didn't always understand. I think I spent most of my life wanting to be chosen by him, wanting to be seen. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. And here's what I've learned. When the people closest to you can't see your worth, you have 2 choices. You either shrink to fit their vision, or you build your own. Someone in the second row nodded. I didn't know them, but it gave me strength. So no, I wasn't the daughter he bragged about. I wasn't the one on his office shelf. But I was still his daughter. I just took a different road. And I think, maybe somewhere, he would have been proud if he'd taken the time to look. I folded the paper and stepped away. Silence. Then someone, Aunt Lynn, I think, started clapping. Tentative, then more joined in. Not everyone, but enough. Enough for me to know I'd done the right thing. Vivian sat frozen. My mom's face was pale, unreadable. I walked back to my seat. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear. From release. After the service, people came up to me. A cousin I hadn't seen in years hugged me and whispered, "That took guts." One of Dad's old friends told me he had no idea I worked in design, said his company was looking for a creative director. I thanked him but didn't commit. That wasn't the win I was after. Later, as we gathered at the house for the reception, I slipped away to the den. My father's space. His old recliner still smelled like his cologne. I sat down, alone for the first time all day. On the wall were the usual frames: Vivian's white coat ceremony, her magazine feature, her Top 40 Under 40 plaque. And there, at the bottom corner, half obscured behind an old newspaper clipping, a printed copy of my Covington speech. My breath caught. It wasn't framed. It wasn't centered. But it was there. Someone had printed it. I sat there a long time, thinking about how complicated love can be, how it can hide behind silence, how sometimes the people we need most are the ones least capable of showing up, and how that doesn't mean we stop showing up for ourselves. That night, I didn't stay for long. I thanked the guests I needed to, said goodbye to the cousins, hugged Grandma, and walked out without saying a word to my mother or Vivian, because this wasn't their moment. It was mine. I didn't go back to Denver for a while after that. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not even when my mom texted that she hadn't heard from me in a bit, with a photo of some half-eaten bon tete and a passive-aggressive caption about family fading like food left out too long. I had no energy left for guilt. Instead, I stayed in New York, signed a 1-year lease on a tiny studio in Queens, and took the offer from that Dutch design firm who'd seen my Covington speech online. It wasn't glamorous, mostly late nights on branding decks and coffee-fueled design marathons. But it was mine, my life, my rules, my voice. And slowly, things started shifting. Zoe helped me pick out a bookshelf from Facebook Marketplace. Lucas drove a U-Haul upstate when I landed my first solo gallery installation. I started sleeping through the night again. I stopped checking my mom's read receipts, but the real twist didn't come until spring. I was sitting in a cafe, sketching logos for a mental health campaign, when my inbox pinged with a LinkedIn message. From Jason. Yeah, that Jason. Vivian's ex. Apparently, ex was the operative word. He kept it short. Hey, Clara. Heard about your work. Would love to connect for a project. Also, a lot has changed. Call me if you're open to it. I shouldn't have clicked his profile, but curiosity won. Vivian and Jason had broken off the engagement 3 months after the funeral. No announcement. Just quiet deletion of wedding photos and Jason's sudden pivot to a new nonprofit startup focused on art accessibility in underserved communities. It didn't take long before we met for coffee. And it definitely didn't take long for me to realize he was not the same Jason from church pews and med school brunches. He apologized, not for the breakup, but for the years he'd played along with the family script. I used to think Vivian was the whole story, he said, but I was just too afraid to question the version of reality your parents handed me. Until you did. What started as a project proposal turned into 3 months of late-night brainstorms, then a soft launch event I helped him design. And then, somewhere between cold pizza and paint-stained sweatshirts, something real. We never rushed it, and we didn't label it right away. But it was the first time I felt truly chosen, without explanation, without translation. Then one afternoon in June, Mom called. She didn't lead with pleasantries. She just asked if I could come home. Said she needed to show me something. Her voice was different. Slower, like life had finally caught up with her. Against every instinct, I went. Turns out Vivian had been offered a leadership role at a biotech startup in Boston. Big salary, big move, and she was going. But here's where it gets messy. The startup had done a background dig and found things. Turns out Vivian had been taking design work from my old school portfolio, things I'd posted only on internal class drives, and passing them off as collaborative projects during her brief stint at a medtech branding agency. She'd stolen my work. I stared at the printouts Mom handed me. Side-by-side comparisons, my typography, my layouts, even a slogan I had made as a joke once. Your story, decoded. She used it. I asked Mom how she found out. Jason told me, she said. He saw one of the old presentations and recognized your line. He thought we knew. I didn't explode. Didn't cry. I just sat there, numb all over again. But this time, not from helplessness. From clarity. Vivian's new company had pulled the offer. Her reputation in that field was now under quiet review. And while she wasn't being sued, the humiliation was public enough to sting where it hurt her most. Status. Mom looked at me, her face drawn. "I failed you, Clara," she said. "I watched you vanish and I let it happen. I thought keeping peace was love. I was wrong." I nodded. That was the closest I'd get to an apology. But it was enough. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need her punished. What happened to Vivian? That wasn't my doing. She wrote that script herself. I just stepped out of it. I left Denver 2 days later, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running. Looking back now, I think the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was learning that love doesn't always come wrapped in fairness. That sometimes justice isn't loud or vengeful. It's quiet. Personal. It's simply choosing yourself after years of being told you didn't matter. And if you're still in the middle of that story, still shrinking to be acceptable, just know you're allowed to stop. You don't need permission to be seen. If this hit something in you, tell me your version in the comments. Seriously, I read everyone. And if you're on your own path out of someone else's shadow, feel free to stick around. You don't have to do this part alone.